nothing happens in a vacuum. Decisions are made and they have the initial consequences, but then there are unforeseen consequences down the road. There has been this ongoing back and forth between DC and China over basically the world. DC has been courting Africa for quite a while, saying to different countries, look, if you have the US be your exclusive provider for this, and this, we will open up and loosen immigration restrictions from your country. The more you play ball with us and the less you play ball with China, the nicer we'll be to you. Well, one of those countries that has been very, very receptive to DC's overtures has been the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Now, just for clarity, there are two Congos in Africa. There's the Republic of the Congo, much smaller, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, much larger. In fact, if you look at this map of Africa right here, the real big country right in the center, that's the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Now, this is where virtually all of the Ebola outbreaks have happened over the last year or so. And yes, it's back, and it's back with a vengeance, but it's back in a way now that proves something we were talking about. Real quick, just to cover the headlines on this, Congo declares new Ebola epidemic 1,000 kilometers from the eastern outbreak. Now, what that means is last April they were so close to say it was over, but then there was a new chain of transmission they found. And so they've been combating this. But now, 1,000 kilometers away, with no way people could have been in common contact with each other, there's another outbreak. And this is what makes them scratch their heads. How are people getting it? This is something that this channel was trying to scream about for about a year, is that it seems as if this is airborne. And they're trying to tamp it down. Now with, of course, the whole COVID thing, it got pushed to the back burner. Democratic Republic of Congo declared a new Ebola epidemic on Monday in the western city of Mbandaka, more than 1,000 kilometers, 620 miles, away from an ongoing outbreak of the same deadly virus in the east. Health Minister Eteni Longondo said 4 people who died in Mbandaka were confirmed as positive cases following testing at the National Biomedical Laboratory in the capital of Kinshasa. Quote, we have a new Ebola epidemic in Mbandaka, Longondo told reporters. We are going to very quickly send them the vaccine and medicine. The outbreak was confirmed by the WHO. Tedros Adhanom, we know who that is, he tweeted, this outbreak is a reminder that #COVID-19 is not the only health threat people face. Congo has been struggling to put an end to a nearly 2-year-old Ebola outbreak near its eastern border with Rwanda and Uganda, which has killed more than 2,200 people, the world's second deadliest outbreak of the disease on record. Now, real quick, Mbandaka is over here. The original outbreak was way over here. And even when you read about Ebola, you can see the problem with it. It's a virus that causes severe bleeding, organ failure, can lead to death. Humans may spread the virus to other humans through contact with bodily fluids. But down here, it says spreads by animals or insects. Like this one. And that's what's starting to happen down there. And that's what I believed happened for the last 2 years. Is these things just, they contaminate one animal after another, and there's really very, very little you can do about it in a place like that. But if DC continues to court these African countries with preferred trade statuses and with all of these perks and incentives and enticements to move away from China and move toward us, we risk bringing this here. And believe me, guys, there is no comparing Ebola and COVID. No comparing it whatsoever. It gets here. It's over. It's done. There's nothing you're going to do about it. That no social distancing. You won't be allowed within a mile of a hospital. And the stuff is so deadly. The reason we use this picture, some people say, okay, I get what you're saying, but what the hell is that weird thumbnail picture you use with the blue and green eye? There was a doctor that went to Africa back in 2014. There was an outbreak in Liberia. And they were very, very careful with these people, and they tested them over a long period of time before they allowed them to return. This guy had tested multiple times. Clean. No problems. Not infected. Flies back to the United States. A month, maybe two later, he starts to feel weird, but then he notices something. One of his eyes starts to turn green. I believe his eyes were blue. And he wondered what that was. Well, guess what? There are places in the body that are absent of the, I don't want to say the blood supply, but there are places where viruses can hide, where they're not in your bloodstream, but they're in your body. There are different systems. There are lymph systems, different places in the body where a blood test won't detect things. Sexual organs, but in his particular case, it was the eyeball. The brain is another. And so he had brought it back to the United States, and it was at a really low level to the point where it wouldn't show up on a test. Came back here, festered in his eyeball, and had he not been a doctor and quarantined himself and said, this is what I think this is, it could have grown to the point where it leached its way back into his bloodstream. He could have gone contagious, and it could have been a nightmare. Same thing happened with a nurse. There was another woman in Africa that had the virus, been cured of it, tested cured, and a year later, she infected her husband and one of her kids. That's how hard it is to rule this thing out. It's incredibly dangerous, and there are multiple strains of it. One second. Ebola Zaire, which is what this particular strain is, has a 70 to 90% fatality rate. Not 7 to 9, not 0.7 to 9, not 0.07. 70 to 90% of the people who get this, it is over. It's done. And this new strain, what makes it so bad is that it doesn't present right away. You can have it for 10, 12, 14 days. Kind of acts like a cold. Sound familiar? And without very specific testing for it, meaning, and this is something that a lot of Americans mistake about how medical testing works. This isn't Star Trek. You don't just hand them a sample of your blood and they put it in a machine and they identify literally anything and everything that's wrong with it. It doesn't work that way. Unless there's a specific test done for a specific thing, random testing for other things won't show it. And since everybody's testing for just COVID-19, they see COVID-19 symptoms and then they test for it. And if that person doesn't have it, oh, I guess you're all right. Must just be the flu or something. Here's some Z-Pack. And it could have been this. And this gets here. And this is this whole thing with DC. Here's an article confirming this. Trump courts Africa to counter coronavirus and China. The administration is trying to signal that African countries can look to the U.S. instead of China, which is facing its own backlash on the continent. Now, this is something where it's an oversight. In April, President Donald Trump launched a flurry of phone calls to African leaders, promising to send ventilators to help the coronavirus, all this outreach, and this is something that's been going on for the last 3 years. The President of Nigeria was invited to the White House, and they signed a bunch of oil deals with him. This is about this little tete-a-tete with China. But believe me, Africa could bring us something oh so much worse than coronavirus. And this would be just a secondary effect of a decision made that people don't understand. And I had a map up and it's gone now. Where is it? Here it is. It was the very first thing I showed. As you can see, these are countries that have travel restrictions because of COVID. The U.S. has partial. Down here in South America, the ones in red have complete. But the Democratic Republic of the Congo has none. Meaning people from here can travel to there and back, no problems. If they can just give a basic excuse for whatever reason. And like I said, it would only take one. It would only take one person. And that's that. Because I guarantee it would get mistaken for this current thing going around. And once it gets into a community, there's really nothing you can do. Very, very little you can do. There were people that were believed to be immune from this because they had gotten it, gone through it, gotten over it, and then were reinfected again. And there's this back and forth about, well, did they reinfect or were they never really, truly free of it? They don't know. There's so much they still don't know about this. But one thing they do know is how deadly it is. It is beyond the worst thing in the world. The movies didn't even do it justice. This disease will wipe out cities. This disease will, and I don't mean wipe out 5%. We're talking about they won't be able to bury him. There won't be enough people left to go get the people who are dying. That whole thing with, what was the Cuba Gooding Jr. one with him and Dustin Hoffman, where they have to do the airburst from the helicopter, from the C-130. That'll be reality. That'll be reality to save the world. If this gets out. So the same things apply. Pardon me. The same things apply. As far as avoiding, if you want my advice, my humble advice, under no circumstances, at any time of day, frequent any 24-hour shops. If you got to get gas at some place that closes. Always have gloves. Always have hand sanitizers. Masks now, I guess, are ubiquitous, so I suppose I don't even need to suggest that. But put yourself in the position of a homeless person, because this is where it's going to start. And think of how you would live, how you would operate, the places you would go, the things you would do. And then avoid those places if at all possible. This isn't a knock on the homeless. It's just that's where they're going to come. These Congolese immigrants, that's where they're going to come. And they're going to be part of that population for a while. So, and pray for each other. That would be my next best suggestion. Because very, very little else can be done at this point about this. But it's back. It's not going away. And now with everything else going on, the law of unintended consequences being what it is, we're going to see it. And I'll leave it there. Like, share, subscribe.